State. Um, Now I work for the SARE program. It's the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. So it's a national program that grants to farmers, researchers to try sustainable strategies on their farms or operations. And so, yes, I've been teaching with Master Gardener for a while now, teaching the entomology and the IPM courses. So we'll talk all about bugs, pest management, and how to kind of incorporate some of these strategies on your farm or in your garden, or it's all kind of strategies that scalable and everyone can use. So today's class is going to be on entomology. Just to do a quick rundown through the agenda, we'll talk about arthropods as the precursor to insects. Talk a little bit about insect anatomy. What is it that makes an insect? Um, where is it that insects live, and what are the roles they play in our environment? I see a lot of questions there about which insects are the good ones versus the bad ones. So we'll talk about insects in their capacity as beneficial insects and as pests, the role of insects in the urban environment. We'll talk a little bit about pollinators and pollinator decline and what we're trying to do to combat it. And then the last third of the class, we will talk about horticulturally important insects and arthropods. So the ones that you're more likely to see in your backyard. Um, so a few of the things we're also going to cover is sort of the or take home message you'll have or understand by the end of this is sort of the importance of entomology in horticulture. So how the insect world and the plant world are connected. Of course, talk about insect pests versus beneficials, common uh, beneficials and pests found in DC. We'll talk a little bit about pollinator decline, and the importance of sort of these um, natural corridors, and this pollinator habitat, and the importance of natural habitat and supporting our pollinators for proper ecosystem functioning. Um, all right, so the first part we want to do is to understand where insects came from. And so insects are a part of the group, the arthropods, and this is a class of organisms that have these segmented bodies. And so at the most basic level, they have these many repeating units, or these repeating segments. So many of the same segments with legs. And over time, um, these legs were specialized to do different things like sense, touch, grasp, move, reproduce, all kind of different things. We'll talk about all of this. And so so insects are within the arthropods. And some of the key traits that make an arthropod is this symmetrical body plan. So the left side looks like the right is a mirror image of the right side. And so if you were to look at a bird's eye view of this arthropod, it would have the, six legs or three on each side, one pair of antenna. So it's a symmetrical sort of down the center. You have many segments, and you can often see those repeating segments. They have a jointed skeleton, jointed exoskeleton. So they typically have that hard chitinous body. So like think of a crab or shrimp or any insect that have that kind of hard outer coverings. Many spiders have it. All spiders have it. They have many legs or appendages, and so many of those repeating legs or appendages were turned into, different sensory organs, movement organs, or the organs that are appendages that let you manage your food. So arthropods are the largest animal group in the world. Many species, you have your insects like ants, beetles, grasshoppers, and things like that. But you also have non-insects like you have mites, you have spiders, you have crustaceans, all kind of different animal groups, but they all kind of are um, the similarities that they all have are that exoskeleton, that symmetrical body plan, the many different segments and things like that. When they're in both aquatic and terrestrial environments. So your aquatic ones are your lobsters, your crabs, shellfish, and then terrestrials are your insects, mites, millipedes, centipedes, things of that nature. Um, And so moving from arthropods to insects. So insects are a subgroup of arthropods. So all insects are arthropods, but not all arthropods are insects. And so the thing that makes the insects is that their body is divided into specialized body regions. And so they have this head, thorax, and abdomen region. The head is for sensory, the thorax is for movement and locomotion, and the abdomen is usually for reproduction, digestion, things like that. And so some of the key defining characteristics for insects are one pair of antennae. So, on the arthropods, these were one pair of segments were modified or evolved to become an antenna. So that sense the environment. They have one pair of compound eyes, so two eyes. They have three pairs of legs. So the insects are also called the hexapods. So the six legs. And so three on each side, two pairs of wings, and those are usually attached to the thorax. Some insects are wingless, some have one pair, so there's always exceptions to the rule. And so we could play a little game of insect or arthropod. And so this one, what do you think this one is? Remember the body plan. We're looking for head, thorax, abdomen. We're looking for a pair of antenna, looking for a pair of wings, six legs. Yeah, both, right? It's insects and arthropods. So that's actually the first time anyone has ever caught that. So yes, insects are arthropods. Good, good, nice one, nice one. How about this one? This one's an arthropod. So lobster only has two major body segments. So the head is the cephalus or cephal region is head, cephalothorax. So on the lobsters, the head and the thorax is one unit, and then the abdomen is another unit. You see the repeating segments, but you don't see the six legs, the head, thorax, abdomen. You see multiple pairs of antenna, more than six legs. You don't see the pair of wings. So this is good. This is an arthropod. All right, next one. Arthropod, right? And so you see the very simple repeating segments, almost identical running down the length of the insect. So many, many pairs of legs. Appendages are just kind of general for walking. No head, thorax, abdomen, no wings, things like that. And the last one, another arthropod. So these is the arachnids or the spiders. So just like the lobsters, they have this cephalothorax region where it's the head and the thorax fused together, and then the abdomen for reproduction or digestion. And so this is this is to just kind of get you familiar with insects, what they are and what they're not, because a huge part of managing insects is identifying them. And so we'll talk a lot today about how to sort of key down into what you may see in your field. All right, so time to talk about insect anatomy. So we talked about the insects having three different parts of the body. So the head is the sensory center. So it has structures for sensing the environment. So, seeing, tasting, smelling, communication, things like that. And so the key parts of the head are the compound eyes, um, the antennae, and then the mouth. And so when you take a look at the compound eyes, they're called compound eyes because they're made up of many little lenses. And so their vision is sort of a composite image of the image of those lenses. Insects also have a secondary eye called a ocellus. And so this helps them perceive light and dark. So many insects, are attracted by lights at night or they shun light. So like cockroaches, when you turn the lights off, turn the lights on, they run away because they're using their ocellus to sense that shift from light to dark. So yeah, the compound eye is made of many of these little lenses, and those lenses make up this composite image. And so it helps give them this 360 vision. It's sensitive to movement, but it's not very high resolution vision. The antennae, so those are sensory organs that help insects sense their physical and chemical environment. So in the case with ants, they use their antennae to tell if another ant is from the same colony. So they're, smelling, tasting with their antenna, chemical reception or chemoreception. So antennae can help ants kind of detect air currents, temperature. You can smell plant cues. Or am I on the right plant? You can smell pheromones. Do you have the same pheromones as my nestmate? They could detect vibrations. So if there's predators around, and taste. So tasting the plant or anything in the environment to see what it is. Um, and there's many different kinds of antennae, and these can be helpful in identifying the type of insect. So these aristate are way more common in flies, lamellate, common in beetles. There are many different kinds of antennae types, and these could be important to know when you're trying to identify what an insect is or arthropod that you might have. Next are the mouth parts. So your mouth parts are used to eat and groom. They manipulate food by grinding, chewing, piercing, and sucking. And so there's a lot of diversity in mouth parts in insects too. So in the case of a grasshopper or cricket, they have sort of this chewing mouth parts where they can use their different parts to kind of manipulate food, chew food, rip food apart. Whereas things like mosquitoes or stink bugs have these needle-like mouth parts where they just stick right into their fruit or their host to pull out, the nutrients. Others still like the butterflies have this sucking, lapping mouth part where they, dig it down in the proboscis and slurp up nectar. So there's different kinds of mouth parts that also can help you identify what an insect really is. So let's do this little activity. So the mouth parts may provide clues on prey choice or type of damage a pest may cause. So if you went out into your backyard and you saw this type of damage, what do you think it would be?
That from a beetle?
Hmm.
From
Japanese,
chewing.
yeah, chewing, right? So you see all these all this defoliation, this chewing like ragged texture on the leaf. So that's from a Japanese beetle. They have sort of chewing mouth parts. How about the next one? This is a sucking insect. So you can see these puncture holes from where something was feeding. So that gives you a big clue as to what it is. And so that's from the brown marmorated stink bug. So they can, on the outside, the damage looks minimal, but when you open it up, you can see a lot of internal damage. So a lot of that can help you key into what an insect is. I see someone ask, does mouth not taste since the antennae taste? And so that's a good question. I'm not sure if they actually have taste buds in their mouth, but I'm sure that they use antennae to, touch whatever, and they get sort of chemoreception from that. So moving on to the thorax. So the thorax is specialized for movement. So the insect legs and the wings are connected to the thorax. There's typically one pair of legs and wings on each segment. The thorax is divided into three parts. So pro means before, meso means middle, meta means end. So prothorax, middle, mesothorax, and metathorax. And the wings are typically on the middle and metathorax, and the legs are on each of the three body segments. So if you look at the cicada, see this prothorax here with the front legs, mesothorax here, and the metathorax is in the back. And you see the legs are attached one each segment. The wings are typically on the mesothorax, and there's a smaller wing right in the back. Remember, insects have two pairs of wings. That's on the metathorax. So legs are appendages modified for moving and manipulating the environment. So insects also have a large diversity of different type of legs that they use. Some are specialized to handle prey. Some are specialized for jumping, walking, and running. So the first type is cursorial. When you see insects with these long, nimble types of legs, that means they're speedy, they can get around. So this is the tiger beetle, one of the fastest insects. Um, Cockroach also have these sort of long, spindly legs, and they're very fast, can get around. Next is saltatorial. So saltatorial means jumping legs. So that's common on your crickets, katydid, grasshoppers, those kind of things. So you see they have this powerful muscular femur that they use to spring away from predators or um, and jump away. Next up is the raptorial. So raptorial means grasping. So on like the praying mantis, they have this sort of ragged hinge of an arm, and they can just kind of pincer their prey and hold it and prevent it from getting away. So um, all these insects have very different ways that they interact with the environment. So their legs, their wings. So thorax is again locomotion. So legs, how they move through the environment. Then wings, right? And so wings are appendages that have been modified for flight. So that's important for movement and dispersal to the new habitat. In some insects, wings are specialized to help with navigation and orientation, protection, or communication. So typically on beetles, you see this very hard outer covering of a wing. So one of the pairs of wings are this uh, hard outer covering. So it's called a elytra. It's a protective covering for the beetle, protect from damage, predators, things like that. And then the hind wings are what they mainly use to fly. And so you see these are much more membranous, more made for flight compared to the hard outer covering. Other insects like this crane fly, they have that first pair of wings, sort of normal membranous wings, but this final, the hind wings are actually these sort of gyroscope type structures that are kind of helps the fly orient and sort of sense their direction. Wings are major are identifying characteristic of insects, so the shape, the size, the structure, or the venation. And the venation is just how the veins are organized on the wing. Um, a lot of times when you go into insect keys, you're looking at venation, what cells are there, to help you really cue down on a specific species. But for just general identification, you don't need to go into super in depth into venation. And then looking at the final part of the insect body plan, you have the abdomen. And so this has segments specialized for digestion and reproduction. So this is the back of an insect, and you can see these repeating segments. The spiracles are their breathing holes. So this is how insects sort of exchange gases with the environment, these little breathing holes. Um, they also have these different appendages for like laying eggs. These also detect chemicals, the cerci, and in some insects, the cerci can be used to mate. They can use to clasp and do different things depending on what the insect needs. And so, some key features of the abdomen are the heart, the digestive organs, and the reproductive structures. And so, in a generalized insect, the heart is running along the spine. The reproductive structures are just throughout the different segments, the different abdominal segments, and the cerci are usually at the end. So the cerci and the ovipositors are often modified for reproduction. Insects use their cerci and ovipositors for oviposition. So in the example of this katydid, they have this blade-like ovipositor, so they can slice the leaf open and lay an egg into the leaf. So when the offspring comes out, they can eat the leaf. So they can dig into leaves, bark, soil, or other insects. We'll learn about parasitoids, I think later or in the next class. Um, some insects use their ovipositors for defense. And so when you think of bees and wasps, they're using their ovipositors to inject venom into any threat to their nest or hive. Reproduction. So cerci are used to hold a mate in place. And so an example of damselflies, you have the male damselfly during mating, they'll reach their abdomen around and with these little claspers and clasp the female damselion, and that initiates her to curve her abdomen up to where his genitals are and to receive the sperm packet. And so this is to just show how, the different um the cerci or the ovipositor abdominal appendages that can be used in mating, placing eggs, defense, things like that. Prey capture. Um, Things like earwigs have these clasping cerci that are used to capture prey or defend themselves. Um, One of the final things I want to do before we take a breakout room or answer questions is play the game of insect or arthropod again. So remember the um the key defining characteristics for arthropods are the exoskeleton. They're symmetrical, jointed appendages. They have multi-segmented bodies. The insects, on the other hand, have those three distinct regions: the head, thorax, and the abdomen. There's one pair of antennae. There's a set of compound eyes, three pairs of legs, and two pairs of wings. And so, how about the first one? This is um well, I can't say what it is yet. How about this first one?
Insect.
That an insect or
Insect.
that's definitely an insect. So you see the hexapoda, so six legs. They have this pair of wings covering the back. They have this multi-segmented body plan. Although the antennas they aren't very noticeable. But oftentimes when you're identifying something, you may just have a blurry picture or piece of a specimen. So, if you can get most of the characteristics, that can even be of some help. How about the next one?
Insect.
Looks like an insect.
Insect. So that's a wasp. Um, you see the head, thorax, the abdomen,
Looks
you
like
get your
insect.
wings, six legs, you get your compound eyes, your antennae. So that's the quintessential insect. Um, lots of lots of wasps or predators and pollinators. So you can see that there's some pollination going on here. What about this one?
Arthropod.
Arthropod.
Arthropod. So this is a centipede. They're also can be beneficial. They're predators. They have these strong jaws that they can use, and they also can deliver venom too. So also good for your garden. How about this next one?
Looks like an insect, maybe.
It's an insect. Yeah. So this is an aphid. So they have so again, you see with pictures, you may not be able
Hard to see all
to
six legs.
yeah, you might not be able to see all six legs or all the body parts perfectly, but if you can deduce what you have based on the clues. And so you see only two pairs of antennae, you see a pair of wings here. Um, it looks like four legs, but aphids have six legs. But good, that's an aphid. How about this next one?
Insect.
I'm gonna say an arthropod.
Arthropod.
This is an
Arthropod.
arthropod.
Yep.
So this is actually a two-spotted spider mite. So that's a devastating pest in like greenhouse and can be in your garden when it's a drought season and plants are water stress. And so you see it kind of looks like one body region. You don't see a specialized sort of a separated head or thorax, abdomen. You got one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight legs. You don't see any compound eyes, don't see any antennae. Um, so again, when you're trying to identify something, if you thought this was an insect, you might choose a whole different, incorrect approach to managing it than, if you correctly identify it as a mite. So this is why ID can be really important. How about this next one?
Arthropod.
Arthropod. So this is a millipede. Um, you see is really displaying that multiple repeating segments. They have a pair of antenna, but already the legs kind of give it away. Your next one,
Arthropod.
Looks like a
arthropod.
spider.
Arthropod, yeah. So that's a wolf
They're
spider.
active.
So these are active predators in your garden. A very good sign um, of sort of a functioning ecosystem. They're going to attack your pests, prey, your caterpillars, things like that. So they have the 8 legs. They have that cephalothorax, so the head fused with the thorax, and then they have that abdomen, 8 legs. And then this last one,
Insect.
insect. So this one is a earwig, right? And so you remember we talked about the abdomen that could be specialized into prey capture or defense. And so this is just showing how the abdomen could be specialized into that. They have the pair of antennae, they have the compound eyes. Their wings are really reduced. So even though it doesn't have wings, it does not mean it's an insect. Sometimes the wings were just lost over time. In the case of earwigs, they're almost kind of just vestigial. Well, that makes sense because earwigs live in the soil, underground, things like that. So they don't really need pronounced wings. All right, so I want to stop right there. So in the first part of the workshop, we talked a little bit about what insects are, how to sort of identify the major parts of their body plan, was how to differentiate between an insect and an arthropod, and just how the different parts of an insect function. Uh, in the next part, I want to talk a little bit more about the insect life cycle and their role in the environment.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jermaine. Great. Let me pause.
All right, so last time we talked a little bit about what makes an insect, what an insect looks like, anatomy and things like that. So now let's talk a little bit about their life cycle and their role in the environment. So insects go through two different types of uh development. The first is hemimetabolous. So hemi means half, so sort of half metabolism. So it's called incomplete development. Hemimetabolous insects go through 3 life stages. You have a egg stage. It's immobile, usually tucked away or hidden away to avoid any predators or habitat disturbances, things like that. The nymphs typically go through 3 to 7 stages. And they just look like a miniature version of the adults, but they lack adult characteristics like fully developed wings. So again, adults are very similar to larvae. There's no pupal stage. Um, just during development, their wings are developing on these exterior pads on their back. Um, with hemimetabolous insects, we notice that adults and larvae tend to feed on similar resources. So when we think of hemimetabolous insects, we're thinking of things like um, stink bugs, aphids. Um, I believe spotted lanternfly, they're hemiptera, so they're also hemimetabolous. So the nymphs look like miniature versions of the adults. The adults have wings that are often maybe brightly colored or different. It's just a fully colored, fully developed wings that they can use to fly. Um, some of the advantages to this is that when your adult looks similar to your juvenile stage, that you can feed in similar environments. If you have a very stable environment, like for example, plants are usually plentiful. Um, you, you, your survival is less dependent on sort of drastically changing your habitat. And so again, some of the insects that do this are um, your roaches, your hemipterans, and you notice that they resemble the adults that resemble the young ones just without the wings. Um, the next step is the holometabolous, and so that means complete development. So here you're seeing the typical life cycle of an insect where you have that sessile egg stage. They're tucked away to avoid predators. Then they have a larval stage. These are usually immobile. They go through 3 to 7 stages, some up to 11 of development. Each between each larval stage, the insect just tends to get bigger as they kind of eat and develop. They go through a pupal stage. So that's this stage where they go completely immobile, and they have a complete reorganization of their body plan. So the larvae looks very different from the adult. And unless you know the complete life cycle, you're very unlikely to kind of match the adult to the larvae. So they have a very different shape from the larval form. Their wings develop internally during pupation, so they're in that pupal form. It's reorganizing their body, developing wings. And this allows the adults to find very different habitats and use very different food sources than your larvae. So if you consider a caterpillar versus a butterfly, caterpillars are eating a lot of leaf material, whereas the adult caterpillar, the butterfly, are drinking nectar through their proboscis, right? And so they have very different food requirements. Other insects that go undergo complete metamorphosis include things like your beetles, your bees, your mantids, things like that. No, sorry, not mantids. Your leopard, your butterflies, your bees, your beetles, flies. So holometabulous insects typically have like a grub or caterpillar looking sort of pupal form. Ants are also holometabulous. So what are some advantages to this? So again, the adult and the larvae can inherit to inhabit very different habitats, and use very different food sources. So there's an advantage if your habitat is maybe fleeting. Think about mosquitoes, right? We just talked about after a short rain, after a large rain, you might have standing water ponds that are there for a week or so. And so if you're a mosquito and your larval form requires that sort of that bit of water to develop, and then when it dries up, you're now an adult that can fly away and disperse to new areas and use a different type of food item. So insects take different approaches to development based on their environment, how they live, things like that. And so insects are very diverse. They're one of the most diverse animal groups we know of. There's over 1 million different species of insects. Most again, it's the most abundant animal group. Um, Many bees, flies, and wasp species. So almost 600,000 species just within bees, flies, and wasps. Then there's another 100K butterflies and moth species, true bug species like your stink bugs, your squash bugs, aphids, things like that. Um, we estimate that there's 3 to 80 million species remaining to be described, because insects can live in extreme habitats, vastly different habitats, fleeting habitats. They're just and they're also tightly associated with their plant host. So wherever there's a plant, you're likely to see some kind of insect near it. All right, so let's talk about where insects live. Insects inhabit almost every habitat on Earth, largely except for the ocean, deep saltwater environments. But there you have just arthropods, right? You have your crustaceans and things like that. Um, Insects live in natural ecosystems, so those that are low disturbance from human activities, things like forests, deserts, aquatic, like freshwater aquatic areas, streams, ponds, lakes, those kind of things, grasslands. They're associated with all plant parts, so your leaves, your stems, roots, fruit, flowers, all parts of the plant. Um, so insects rely on all parts of the plant for their development. They also live in semi-natural areas. So these are ecosystems that experience frequent disturbance or alteration from human activities. So when you think of a farm or a managed corridor or something like that, hedgerows, field boundaries, highway corridors, insects depend on some of those areas for resources, or they live in those areas. Insects also live in urban areas, so those densely populated by humans. Are major areas of natural ecosystems that are replaced with hard spaces, buildings, and infrastructure. So even with that, you still have insects kind of finding their way in our urban areas. And so insects inhabit plants in and around cities. They can live in buildings, sort of in close kind of proximity to humans or in close relation to humans. And their building and structure causing damage. nuisance, filth, those kind of things. Um, so these are just some descriptions of the natural and semi-natural areas. So in this meadow by a forest, you might have many different pollinators like your monarchs, especially in this area. You have your honeybee that are foraging for honey, and other resources. Your trees can have your longhorn beetle species or these scaly insects that can be a pest. Um, Others have these predatory ground beetles that run around, attack prey. They're very good for pest management. In your managed ecosystem, like a farm, so in my work, I did a lot of research on lady beetles and agro ecosystems. So I was all about seeing how we could put flowering species in the environment to support them. And so someone mentioned before about the multicolored Asian lady beetles. So this is an example of that. They have this interesting W pattern on the head, and they tend to be more spherical. They could range anywhere from orange to bright red. They can have one to many spots. But one of the key characteristics I use is that W. The native species, on the other hand, has this sort of lighter or pinker texture, and they tend to have 12 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And these are very important natural enemies to small pests like scales, aphids, caterpillar pests like European corn borer, aphids. Um, but both of these environments have insects. Some are beneficial, some can be pests. And we'll talk a little bit more about what makes a pest. Insects also live in the soil. So, on the farm, you have your ground community of insects. They're, doing all kinds of ecosystem services. They're in the soil, they're building the soil, they're looking for prey, managing pests, all kind of things. In your forest, you have forest dwelling insects. If you lived in this area for a while, you remember the different flights of cicadas we had. I think was the last one in 21 or 20, something like that. Um, Urban areas, so you can have things like your mosquitoes, your termites, spotted lanternfly, different mosquitoes, different things. Again, ants are important insects for the soil ecosystem, in the water. So these are water striders. They're a good indicator of soil, of your stream health or the health of the aquatic ecosystems, food for fish, birds, different things. So what are the insects doing out there? So we're seeing that they live pretty much everywhere. So what are they doing in the environment? So insects and arthropods fill many ecological roles and provide valuable ecosystem services. Um, and so ecosystem service is just this role in the environment that benefits humans in some way or benefits the ecosystem. One is recycling nutrients. So many insects are feeding on plant matter, leaf matter, organic debris, breaking that down. Others break down carrion. So you see roadkill, the insects are hard at work breaking that down so the nutrients could be returned to the earth. Same thing with dung. Dung beetles kind of help cycle those nutrients. Many insects that live in the soil, they're aerating the soil, turning it over. Remember, the soil is a living organism, so super important for motion to be happening in the soil. So aerating the soil, turning it over, adding their nutrients through like frass and pee and things like that. Insects are also important for plant propagation and the maintenance of the plant community. So the insects are probably most widely known for pollinating. All the charismatic insects are pollinators, your butterflies, your bees, but they do an important job of helping plants reproduce by spreading that pollen. Some insects carry pollen, some insects carry seeds, and they're moving them around. Um, Insects defoliate plants and eat seeds, and so insects can help keep um, plants that are too abundant or too weedy or too invasive in check by eating them, eating their seeds. Insects are also important for maintaining ecological balance and biological control. So feeding on other organisms and pest organisms. And insects in general are just a key group for many wildlife species. Your birds, your frogs, your mammals, a lot of different things are eating insects as a major part of their diet. So to talk a little bit about more about nutrients cycling and decomposition. So arthropods play many roles in the breakdown of and decomposition of organic materials. If you ever bought bananas and they're starting to turn brown, you know about fruit flies, and all they're trying to do is sort of recycle that banana peel and break it down. Um, so they're developing from it, but there's also recycling the nutrients. Pill bugs or sow bugs, they eat decaying organic matter. So, you know, your roly-polies in the soil, they're often a sign of a healthy soil community. Um, Carrion beetles and dung beetles. So carrion beetles break down animal corpses and things like that. Dung beetles break down animal hair. Dung beetles break down animal dung, while other insects break down animal hair, bones, and things like that. Um, so nutrients are recycled by insects, fungi, bacteria into more plant available forms. And so for plants to get that carbon and nitrogen locked up in insects, you need these different players to break it down. And so you see, um, you know, these different insects and arthropods break down this organic debris for bacteria and fungi to make that available to plants. Next up, pollination and seed dispersal. So insects are always closely linked to the plant community. Plants depend on insects to reproduce and disperse. Through their activity, many insects are pollinating the different flowering plants we see. So pretty much every fruit and vegetable you eat had a pollinator, um, had to be pollinated for it to set that fruit. Um, so pollination is just the transfer of pollen between plant reproductive organs. Um, I think this number has been updated now. I think over 85% of global food crops depend on pollination by insect. This is an old number from 2005, but the estimated value of that is 235 to 577 billion dollars contributing to global food production. So insect decline can have a significant impact on sort of the, you know, global food supply. Um, some species of insect forage for seeds to eat, reducing the populations of weeds. So they're helping disperse seeds or manage the population of weeds. Some of those important pollinator groups we'll talk about are your bees and your wasps, your butterflies and moths, as well as your beetles. And so you can see the honeybee has all of those hairs to attract and carry a lot of that pollen. So it's easy to, you know, pollinate the next plant. Uh, um, through their action, things like butterflies also get pollen on them that transfers as they visit different plants looking for nectar. This is a ground beetle. They're often predators, but they will go for weed seeds as well. Insects are also important for ecological balance and biological control. So insects are food for a wide range of organisms. It's an important resource for all terrestrial and some aquatic food webs, birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fish, even humans are eating insects. They help to control the population of other organisms. So we're going to talk about biocontrol next class and how insects are very important for managing pest species like spotted spider mites or aphids or, you know, different sort of generalists, you know, like spotted lanternfly, you know, um, different um, insects can prey on them, and then even larger animals can prey on them too. Humans benefit from insects that attack pests of agriculture and human property, and that's called biocontrol. So that's one use of the use of one organism to suppress pest populations. So this is an example of a lady beetle larvae. So remember, this is going through holometabolous development. The larvae looks very different from the adult. So a larval lady beetle has this almost like alligator shaped body. So you see those six legs, and again, no wings because it's an image, it's a larvae. Remember, the adults get the full wings. Other than that, you couldn't really tell. So many people probably wouldn't guess that a lady beetle larvae looks like that, and you know, compared to what a lady beetle looks like. The showy red and black beetle, it's very different look to it. And then again, this is just illustrating that insects are very important food group for other insects during the cicada invasion. A lot, birds, dogs, everything are eating cicadas, groundhogs, all kind of things. So it's um, really interesting to see. So let's talk about the roles of insects sort of in relation to humans. So insects as beneficials. Um, so beneficial insects provide important ecosystem services like pollination and biocontrol. And so they pollinate edible and flowering plants. Others are biocontrol. So this is example of a tomato hornworm, and it has all these egg cases sticking out of it. And so this was actually done by a wasp. Talked about how they use ovipositors to inject their eggs into their host. And so this is what happened here. A wasp stung um, this caterpillar and laid eggs inside. And so as the eggs hatch, they develop inside the caterpillar. And then this is the pupa. And so after the pupa stage, these will turn into fully adult wasps that could reproduce and attack more tomato hornworm. So if you're growing tomatoes, you'll be happy to see this. It's really kind of unsettling to see it and gross to see, but this is a good thing happening if you can see this. And I'll include some beneficial insect resources here. Talk a little bit about insect as pests. And so while we do get a lot of benefits and positive ecosystem services from insects, there's also some damage that insects can cause. Um, um, so how do we define what a pest is? A pest is any organism that causes direct or indirect damage to human interests. So there's no pests in nature unless it comes to humans, right? And so in a native ecosystem, insects are just kind of existing, but when they come to damage human interest, it becomes classified as a pest. All right. And so a pest can are typically causing damage to crops, property, so structural damage. Some can even be considered sort of nuisance. So maybe not actively damaging, but in the case of like the spotted lanternflies swarming areas, that could be seen as like a nuisance pest. And some insects and arthropods cause different health issues. So some vector diseases, things like um, mosquito-borne diseases, tick-borne virus diseases, like um, I'm forgetting the Lyme disease, things like that. And some of the negative impacts that insects can have are direct damage to the fruits and flowering parts of plants, indirect damage through plants by um, sort of sucking out the plant juices, causing it to be stressed and less able to put on healthy fruit or survive further damage. They can vector diseases. This could be bacterial infections to other plants or even humans. Um, and structural damage. So your typical termites chewing through woods, things like that. And so we're all well aware of the spotted lanternfly. They can swarm. They appear in large numbers. They're attracted to many of the different species that humans use for food items, for aesthetic plantings, things like that. We see caterpillars or agricultural pests. Um, this appears to be a lady beetle. It's a type of lady beetle, but instead of it being a predator, it's actually a pest. This is the Mexican bean beetle. And so, again, sort of, it's important to learn how to identify insects to know whether you have a pest or a beneficial. You can argue this looks exactly, very similar to the Asian lady beetle. All right, so let's talk about insects in the urban environment. And so when it comes to the urban environment, insects largely maintain their ecological roles, but they face additional challenges because just the nature of urbanization, right? And so we know that insects like different food, shelter, a robust habitat that they could get their needs fulfilled. But in urban environment, the green spaces tend to be replaced with hard spaces. So you have fragmented habitat patches, you have lack of food and shelter, frequent disturbance, light pollution, and even higher temperatures. And so around a lot of the hard surfaces, they tend to absorb sunlight and just raise the ambient temperature. In some cases, insects develop faster when it's in the warmer temperatures, but in some cases, it could push them um, to a stress into sort of a stress response where they're in need of those water and nectar resources to prevent sort of heat stresses. Um, Urban environments can be a hotspot for insects because due to the nature of sort of green spaces, they tend to be a lot more floral diversification. So if you want many different ornamental species, um, that can be you can see higher numbers of things like bees and stuff. So higher species diversity of bees and increased flower visitation. So if you have this sort of uh, sort of large urban environment, a diversified planting could be a signal where would attract and kind of retain um, or increase visitation to that area. I'm going to talk about pollinators, right? And so we've been seeing a lot of general insect and pollinator decline. And different studies show global insect decline and for arthropods and especially pollinators. And just on this graphic is just illustrating many of the different things that are believed to be contributing, just overall like urbanization. So um, taking land out of sort of natural areas and turning them into semi-natural or urbanized areas. And so to do that, you have to clear away resources like your natural, forests. A lot of weedy species, a lot of habitat and stuff are lost in that process. Introduce species. We talked about the multicolored Asian lady beetle displacing native pollinators. Um, Agricultural intensification. So all activity associated with sort of industrialized agriculture. So again, taking, using more land, inputs associated with agriculture, like your pesticides and pesticides drift into tree lines and things like that. Can stress insects. It could take away native weedy species, just nesting areas, um, global warming and droughts. Um, Extreme weather can knock away insect numbers or just make it difficult to survive the winter. It's many different things that are contributing to um, the insects and the arthropods having a harder time, especially with the honeybees we've been seeing. Um, just I guess in the past 20 years, we've been seeing a lot of honeybee decline, and so started I think a lot of it was first noticed in 2005, 2006 when they noticed this new phenomenon where worker bees were abandoning the colony, leaving behind healthy queen and food resources, and they eventually came to call it colony collapse disorder. It's been associated with like high mortality, stress, and disease bees. The thing is, between 2006 and 2014-ish, colony collapse disorder, as it was seen, sort of went away, right? We stopped seeing colonies, or seeing it as much, stopped seeing colonies where that they're abandoning. Um, Now instead, we're just seeing a lot of die off, and so they're dead bees, diseased bees, and some of the suspected causes are that there's this parasitic mite, the varroa mite. I'll talk a little bit more about it, and it's now found to be highly resistant to the number one mite control, which is amitraz. And so, it's a devastating pest to honeybees because they feed on the honeybees and transmit viruses through the hive. Other things are just insecticide contamination because that could stress the bee, give them impair their senses, make it more difficult to forage. The stress from environmental land use changes. So many bees are transported around the country to get pollinate, different crops. So with that, they're exposed to different environments, harsher winters and things like that. Less forage available in the form of pollinating flowers, large abundance throughout the season, and in general, poor nutrition due to less forage for bees to find. So these past 2 years have been particularly rough for honeybees. We've seen a 62% die off in this past year, and then the year before that, we saw 55% of bees in the managed colonies dropping down. Other than that, it's been about 30% annually. since then. So they're really trying to get a handle on this honeybee situation. Um, to talk a little bit about more about the varroa mite, which is the number one pest. Is this mite right here. It's almost shaped like a dinner plate. And you see it has these 8 legs. See that this almost looks like one region of the body, right? And so what they do is they enter the hive, and so as the bees is developing, so at first the queen will lay a bee into the honeybee cell, and as it develops, they bring resources, your to the developing pupa, right? Remember the egg pupa? And so what happens is an infected bee carrying a varroa mite, the varroa mite will sense that bee larvae and drop off into the cell and attach to the bee. And so while the bee is developing, it uses its piercing, sucking mouth part to drain the bee of its hemolymph or its blood. And while it's doing that, it starts reproduction. So the mite will reproduce in there with the bee larvae and drain the bee of its nutrients. And when the bee emerge, so does the mite. And so the bee will emerge with a mite attached to it, and it'll drop off into the next cell and proliferate throughout the colony. And so one of the problems is that a newly emerging bee is already starting off weakened or drained of their nutrients. And so you could think of how this is going to impair its ability to forage, to pollinate, to do everything a bee needs to do. Um, but in some good news, the bees are fighting back. We're seeing bees develop behavioral traits to where some are showing anti-mite behaviors. Um, One of them are called varroa sensitive hygiene, where the bees they can sense, or I don't know if it's through like smell or whatever, they can sense when a varroa mite is in one of the cells, and they will take out the diseased bee and discard it. Others, they'll groom the other bees and bite the legs off of the mite. And so when you bite the legs off of the mite or the appendages, remember some are for locomotion, some are for chemo reception, so smelling, finding your way out. So bees will bite off those organs of the mite and leave them there to die. And so the scientists at USDA and Penn State and stuff are um, trying to um, breed these traits into bees because they found out both are heritable traits, and so they're trying to see if this behavioral kind of management can be something to help them fight back. So there is a lot of research going on in this area. That's it about the honeybees. We're also seeing just native pollinator decline, again, due to habitat loss, fragmentation, poor nutrition, harsh winters and droughts, things like that. Apiculture practices, so shipping bees around. When you introduce honeybees to a habitat, there's thousands of bees coming in. They're going to be pollinating those, whatever's in the area, and then the native pollinators have to compete with that. And many native pollinators ended up getting displaced or outcompeted, right? And you're thinking of your bumblebees or squash bees, different types of butterflies. And one of the reasons the native pollinators can often be better for your gardens, for example, if you're dealing with native crop species like, let's say, for example, cucurbits, they have squash bees that have evolved to pollinate squash or cucurbit plants, and so they're more efficient at it than the general honeybee. And so those are some ways that apiculture practices can impact the local community. So coming out of the doom and gloom, how do we support our pollinators and beneficial insects? So again, if you build it, they will come. And so the first step to doing that is keeping soil covered. So remember, insects are in close association with plants. And so vegetation serves as a habitat for foraging and cover for insects. So important habitat, refuge, nutrition source, water source. So you want to add diverse vegetation. Focus on native plant species. So that's better suited for this habitat, suited for the native species here. You want to also sort of include larger interconnected patches where available, rather than different islands of vegetation. You want to have a large interconnected patch so insects can get to and from them. Add refuge sites to support beneficial insects. So things in the habitat like bee boxes or nesting sites that they could temporarily use, water sources and garden ponds, especially when we have these kind of hot days. We just had a couple of 90-degree days, right? And so, insects are definitely looking for relief in these times. Reducing the level of pesticide use. And so when pesticides are typically neurotoxins for insects, and so they affect everything with the same neural pathway, and even humans have a similar neural pathway. And so, if you put an insecticide out there, chances are it's hitting more than just what you're targeting. So they often are shown to knock beneficial species back. Uh, they're slower to attack prey. They're slower to lay eggs, and they're just slower to overall develop. So many pesticides have non-target effects on many beneficial insects. So in just a generalized sort of view of this backyard garden or your backyard, um, some of the features you can include to attract beneficial insects. You have things like a bog garden or just different flowering plants. And remember, it's important to have that flowering resource in space and time. So flowering throughout the season. You can have mini meadows, different wildflower plantings. You can have compost heaps for your soil dwelling insects. Unmowed areas. This is a bug hotel. It's just includes these different tools and hollow areas for different insects to come and go. A water resource like a pond or something like that. Stone piles are important for predators or different um, uh, insects that decompose plant matter. Trees are super important for the resources that they provide to insects. Just having that diversified, kind of robust habitat, build towards that, and you'll see many different species visiting. So here I just include a quick list of different species that are native to the North America and the sort of the northeastern United States. Many different species. So you see different colored shapes, sizes, different availability through the season. And I included this list of resources so you can go and find pollinators that you might be interested in using. And so that's all about how sort of insects are developing their role in the environment and sort of the status on pollinators and sort of our approaches to help support them in our landscape. In the next part of class, we're going to go one by one through some of the major insect orders, talk about how to identify them, what their role is, um, and yeah, how to identify them in their role and sort of the ones important to your backyard gardens, their farm.
Great. Thank you, Jermaine. Let's take some time in breakout rooms. So take a chance, talk to people. What are some strategies you've done to support beneficial insects? Any reflections on things that he shared? And we'll be back to share out.
Okay.
Let me get our breakout rooms going. All right. Okay, see you all back here in a few minutes.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So for the last part of the class, we'll talk about horticulturally important insects and arthropods. So I'll just give you a really simple way to identify many of the different orders of insects and arthropods that you're going to see. Um, so there's over 30 insect orders and many orders of arthropods. And by order, I mean a taxonomic ranking that classifies organisms based on morphological similarity. That's a mouthful, but morphological similarity just means what does it look like? So it's physical characteristics. So body plan, and major identifying characteristics for the body plan. And so insects and arthropod groups are important to gardeners. They include non-insect arthropods. So We'll talk about your pill bugs, spiders, your daddy longlegs, centipedes, millipedes, mites, springtails, hemimetabolous insects. So incomplete development. These include your dragonflies, damselflies, grasshoppers, crickets, lacewings, true bugs, things like thrips. Then you have your holometabolous insects, your beetles, butterflies, moth flies, wasps, bees, those kind of insects. And we talk about which ones are pests, which ones are beneficials. And so first up are your pill bugs and sow bugs. So these are non-insect. Remember, they don't follow that head, thorax, abdomen, body plan. Many more than six legs. And so the pill bugs and the sow bugs are in the order Isopoda. So iso means equal, poda means feet. So many of their legs have equal feet. It's Greek, so equal feet. So these sow bugs are usually flat, so they live under rocks, in the soil. They have multiple pairs of legs, usually 14. And you can really see that arthropod segmented body plan here, the exoskeleton. They tend to only have one pair of antennae. And these are more often scavengers. They're feeding on decaying organic matter, so important nutrient cyclers. Occasionally, if their numbers can get too high, they can chew the stems of young plants. Occasionally, a pest on plants. So when someone asks, is this a pest? You got to monitor and see what it's doing in your situation, right? In one landscape, it may not be a pest, where in others, if the conditions are right, you have really moist soil, lots of hiding areas for pill bugs. Their numbers can grow, and they occasionally can be a pest. And so they tend to like moist soil, lots of organic matter. So these are usually, you call them commensal. They're not neither good or bad. They're just out there. But again, in the environment, they're cycling nutrients, and they can be food for other organisms. Next up are your spiders. So they're in the order Arachnida, and in the family Araneae. They don't have any antenna. They tend to have two body segments. So that cephalothorax that we talked about, and then the abdomen. They have this sharp constriction between the cephalothorax region and the abdomen. So there's this sharp waist right there. They have the classic four pairs of eyes, and four pairs of legs. So your eight legs, eight eyes. They're very important generalist beneficial predators. They have diverse lifestyles. So some of your predators are web building spiders. You see this golden orb weaver has this grasshopper sprung up in this web. Ground spiders or wolf spiders, they're active hunt and ambush prey. You have the crab spiders. They're active hunters too. They can jump. They have really sharp vision. All of these represent good bugs, or provide positive ecosystem services in your garden. Your daddy longlegs and harvestmen. So they're in the order Arachnida. So they're related to spiders, but they're in a different group called the Opiliones. They lack any antennae. They have eight long, thin legs. So just like that spider body plan, they have eight legs. But for daddy longlegs, like their name implies, they have legs over 30 times their body lengths. So if you look at the body in relation to the legs, you see that big difference, and that immediately keys you into harvestmen. And so what are they doing in your garden? They're actively hunting prey, soft-bodied insects such as mites and other slugs. And so if you see this in your backyard, and your instinct is to kill it, here it is with an aphid in its mouth. And so if you have aphid problems, that daddy longlegs was there to help with that problem. Next up, you have your centipedes and millipedes. They belong to multiple orders. So the centipedes are typically called cent. So centi means 100, peds mean feet. So 100 legs. They have a long pair of antennae. The first pair of appendages are usually this jaws or claws, and they have a stinger in them that could uh, uh, deliver venom into their prey. So they're hunters, active predators. They're attacking small insects and spiders. So you see that classic arthropod body plan, the many repeating segments. Some of the appendages are specialized. So the stinger slash sort of jaw claws, and then you see their cerci here doing something else. And then their other legs used for movement. Then you have your millipedes, and so these are whereas the centipedes are flattened, the millipedes tend to be cylindrical, sort of in the shape as a pen or pencil. They have these really short antennae. So millipedes, milli means thousand, peds means legs, so your thousand legs, and you see those repeating body segments. But on millipedes, you see 2 legs per segment, and that's repeating over many different segments. These are often scavengers found in detritus, so they're breaking down those nutrients. So one is a predator, others are often scavengers. Then you have your mites, right? So mites are another big groups of arthropods. They're often less than a millimeter in length. Um, sort of plant-based or um, plant-associated mites um, they can be pests or predators. They lack antennae. They have 8 legs. They have usually a flattened body that appears to be fused or one segment. They can be found in plants or in soil, and they're important herbivorous pests. And so, two-spotted spider mites are important greenhouse pests or garden pests. They can web up your plants and really suck them dry. Um, Another mite you heard about earlier today was the Varroa mite, right? It had this very similar kind of fused body with the 8 little legs underneath. It looks like one section. So you see how they can look very similar yet different at the same time. So it's really important to know what it is. This one right here is a predatory mite. So two-spotted spider mite here is a pest. This is a predatory mite that is eating the two-spotted spider mite. And so you can have pests and beneficial in the same order. It's really about identifying your organism, seeing what it is and what it's doing before you act. Then you have your springtails. They're in an order called Collembola. So these are non-insect arthropods. They're tiny. They tend to have these 6 legs. They have a specialized furcular organ that are used for jumping. So they have this little hinged appendage on their back that they'll flick out and use to jump. And these are typically found in moist soil and leaf litter, near water, near potted plants. They're very important decomposers, feeding on fungi, bacteria, and soil microbes. Collembola has often been thought of as soil biohealth indicators. So where you see these jump, they're really kind of hard, these white specky things that you see hopping around on soil, and they're often near the edge of ponds or more soil. And they're a good indicator that you have a healthy soil community there. And they're very rarely damaging to young plants. So getting into the holometabolous insects, the first up you have your dragonflies and damselflies. This is in the order Odonata. These are for the Odonata, I believe was your tooth-winged insect. I forget why they're called the tooth-winged insects. But they are generally aquatic and terrestrial generalist predators. So you're always going to see these around areas where there are bodies of water because they're larval form. This is the larval form, and they're often in water. They'll attack fish, other insects. They're active predators. And you see that if you look at the larval form versus the adult form, they have a very similar body plan, but with wing. If you imagine the wings on the nymph, you have an adult, right? So compound eyes, antenna, 6 legs, but holometabolous, the nymph looks like the adult, but just without the wings. So dragonflies tend to have this thick, robust, cylindrical body, pencil shaped. They're strong flyers. They're large eyes that are touching. So you can see the eyes touching up top. At rest, your wings are held open across like that. And again, these are very important aquatic system predators. They're eating a lot of mosquito larvae in those kind of aquatic environments. Damselflies are sort of the opposite. They have the slender cylindrical body. At rest, the wings are folded, tent-like over their back, and they have these large eyes separated by their head. So these are important predators, not so much pests. Your grasshoppers, katydids, and crickets. These are in the order Orthoptera. Ortho means straight, ptera means wing, so your straight-winged insects. And so they have these four wings here that are sort of they're like leather-like and thickened. They commonly have these hind wings specialized for jumping. So remember we said morphological characteristics are though, appearance, right? And so grasshoppers, crickets, katydids tend to have this large jumping leg. They're generalist herbivores, so they have those chewing mouth parts to tear up plant vegetation, leaves, things like that, crops. They commonly feed on grasses and broadleaves, your beans, your leafy vegetables, and corn. But in a previous slide, we saw a spider eating one of these, right? And so it's showing sort of that system going on. Next up, you have your mantids, the order Mantodia. They have this signature triangular shaped head. They have this long
Can I
thorax. You
ask you
see
a
the,
quick question
yeah, sure, go ahead.
for the slide before?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
were the two, like what was that first one? And
This is a
I think the
cricket.
second one, that's a cricket,
The first one is a
and
cricket, and the second one
that's a
is a
grass.
grasshopper. Yeah. So they're in the
Okay.
same order. They're in different families, but the same order. So they both have that thick jumping leg. They, they scrape their leg against their wing to make mute, to make noise or communicate. Katydids do it too. They're also in this order. Um, yeah, so simple morphological characters. Yeah. So mantids, they have that long thorax. And remember, the legs are attached to the thorax, so you can see the legs kind of attaching against this long thorax. Um, they're large generalish ambush predators, so this is especially good for your garden. They prey on moths, aphids, flies, caterpillars, crickets, grasshoppers, smaller prey. So all of those pest species we've been talking about, mantids are generalists, and they'll be attacking those. They have that characteristic grasping forelegs. So remember when we talked about legs, we talked about raptorial. So here you could see it in action. This looks like a grasshopper, right, or a cricket, and you can see the grasping arms or legs holding it tight, allowing to kind of finish it off. Next, we have our lace wings. They're in the order Neuroptera. So neuro means net, like your neurology, your nervous system is like a net-like. So your net-winged insects. They have two pairs of membranous net-like wings. And so you see that here. Wings are similar in size. Remember, wings are important characteristic when you're trying to identify. At rest, they're held tent-like over their body. So remember, it's important to know the different stages of an insect, right? And so this is an important beneficial insect. And so the egg is laid at the end of the stalk, and it gives rise to these larvae. They look very much like a lady beetle larvae, but they have these two strong pincers that they use to grab prey, like this aphid here. And it's like a straw to suck out the hemolymph out of the aphid, take out that aphid and move on. And then when um, it develops into a adult with the wings. You see a completely different body plan. So this is a holometabolous insect. So important adult and larval predators. They have that pincer-like mouth part, and they feed on soft-bodied prey. True bugs. This is your hemiptera. So hemi means half, like hemimetabolous, half or incomplete, half-winged. And they have this characteristic hemielytra. It's this leathery, thickened wing at the base. So on the spotted lanternfly, this is an example of a hemiptera. You see here at the bottom of the wing, the base of the wing attaching to the thorax, it's sort of leathery. And then as it moves out, it becomes more membranous. They have these long, piercing, sucking mouth parts that can pierce into the plant or your fruit, into bark, and they suck out plant sap, hemolymph from other insect. They have many pest species in this group, but there are also many beneficial species in this group that are predators, and you'll see a good example of that next week. So your true bugs include things like scale insects, spotted lanternfly, squash bugs, brown marmorated stink bugs, aphids, other insects. And you have your earwigs. Your earwigs are in the order Dermaptera. Derm means skin, wing means ptera. So skin wings, they have this sort of reduced fleshy wing that we talked about earlier. So reduced leathery forewings. They have this characteristic pincer on the abdomen, and it's typically in the males. They have a flattened body because they tend to live, under debris, under rocks and things like that to get around. They're often found living in soil, under rocks, leaf litter. They're omnivorous, and so they're active predators of soft bodies insects. But if their numbers of high or their resources are low, they may go after plants. Thrips are another important pest. They're in the Thysanoptera group. So thysano means fringe, ptera means wing. So your fringed or tassel wing insect. And so they have these fairy-like kind of fringed wings. They're very small, so you probably need a microscope to see them. So less than 1 millimeter. They have the spindle-shaped body, these prominent eyes, and they have piercing, sucking mouth part that leaves pale areas on the leaf surface. So they're sucking out and stressing plants. And so they're important pests of horticultural plants. And you have your beetles. They're in the Coleoptera group. So coleo means sheath, ptera means wing, and one of the defining characteristics is they have this elytra. They have completely hardened outer wings, and so on the classic lady beetle, they have this hard shell, and when they separate the shell, you can see the membranous wings underneath it. This is a flower beetle, important pollinator and predator. We talked about the larvae of the lady beetle. So it goes from this to a pupal stage and then to something like this. And so really seeing that whole metabolism development. Um, so beetles include pests. They also include predators, and they also include pollinators, right? And so down here we have these are cucumber beetles, striped cucumber beetles, right? And so major pests on any cucurbit. They spread disease. It can be important pests. They can girdle young plants and kill them off. So many different groups are included in the beetles. This is one of the most diverse groups of insects. So they fill many ecological niches. Your omnivores, herbivores, predators, and detritivores. And they have a characteristic sort of grub-like stage like this. Your butterflies and your moths, those are your Lepidoptera. So lepid means scale, ptera means wings, so scale wings. And so you've heard the don't touch a butterfly because the scales will fall off. Those are the scales we're talking about. The powdery-like scales that they have on their wings to help them. So they have two pairs of large, showy wings. They have these long straw-like mouth parts that they use to get a nectar drink from flowers. Butterflies usually have long, thin, knobbed antennae like this, while moths have plumose antenna or feather-like antenna. Other than that, there's no real difference between a butterfly and a moth. It's kind of just charisma. They have this distinct caterpillar form. So they start out worm-like, they go through that signature pupa, and they develop into this butterfly with the wings, showing that complete development. They're important pest and pollinator species. You have your flies, those are your diptera. So di means two, ptera means wing. So your two-winged insects. So many flies appear to have one pair of wings, but if you look closer, you usually a second reduced pair, and these are often for orientation and navigation. They have mouth parts used for sponging, sucking, and piercing. So if you look at this picture, you might see the black and yellow, think, bee, but this is actually a bee mimic. It's called a hoverfly or a syrphid fly. And they take on that honeybee color to kind of serve as a warning to warn predators, but it's actually harmless. And they're an important pollinator. And in fact, their larvae are predatory. Syrphid fly larvae will attack aphids. It's like this little grub that will go along and attack soft-bodied insects. And so while many flies can be pests and plants and things like the seed corn maggot here, others can be predators and important pollinators. And so for the fly, you see one pair of wings. They have the reduced halter back there. Remember we talked about that aristate antenna on the fly. So you see that's an identifying characteristic, and then you look at the mouth part and it has that sponging mouth part. And so again, it's important to kind of key into these key features to really identify what something is. Again, flies fills a range of niches: omnivores, herbivores, predators, detritivores. Some are pollinators. Then you have your bees and your wasps, and so these are in the Hymenoptera order. Hymen means membrane, so your membrane winged insects. So they have two pairs of membranous wings. The hind wings tend to be smaller, so you see the two pairs of wings right here. That first wing is sort of larger, more complete, whereas the hind wing is smaller. Um, Hymenoptera typically have a distinct waist between the thorax and the abdomen. Um, they have a distinct ovipositor in females, so often modified for defense. So bees, wasps have the stinging ovipositor that they use, and they fill many ecologically important roles. And so pollinators for most cultivated foods. They're also generalist predators, and they're parasites of pest insects. And so I'll show you the video next class, but many wasps will lay eggs into other insects. And so this, it's an aphid mummy, is a parasitized aphid. And so wasp came along and stung an aphid. The eggs develop inside the aphid. It hatches, the larvae will eat the aphid from the inside out and then burrow its way out as a newly emerged adult wasp that could go and control other aphids. The bees and wasps also include the ants. Ants are also they're considered wingless bees in a way. They're both social. Ants have stingers, like if you think of like velvet ants and things like that, they have a modified ovipositor that's developed as a stinger. So yeah, ants are in the bees and wasps group. And so those are some of the major orders of insects I wanted to talk about and how to really key in on just the basic group of what something is. Of course, it could get more
So Jermaine,
complicated.
would you
Yeah,
highlight again
yeah,
which ones are the main pests? Because it seems like I
Wh-
heard like grasshoppers, crickets, and
yeah,
they
yeah,
seem to be primarily pests.
yeah. And so
Beetles can be
yeah, yeah. And so again, pest is sort of a fluid thing, right?
right.
Each of these groups tend to have both. Like so
Hmm.
within a similar order, many of the insects in an order can occupy different ecological niches, right? And so,
Yeah.
you in your butterflies, some may be herbivorous, attacking plant parts. You know, others are pollinators. So it can be a pest and a beneficial within two different parts of the same life cycle,
Gotcha.
depending on the damage it's causing you, the abundance of them, and because that magnifies the damage that they could be causing you. So it's you can't. There isn't really a broad generalization to say, hey,
Mm.
all Hymenoptera are beneficial insects, where because depending on their role that they're filling in the environment, its actions in relation to you and what you can tolerate. So you folks might consider a wasp nest on their house a pest, right? They're not
Yeah, they
necessarily.
don't want them near their kids.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a safety thing or a nuisance thing. So, in addition to sort of, damage to your food crops or your structure, it can be you know, they have aesthetics, right? And so people like their ornamentals or they want safety around their house or things like that. So a pest can be a pest because of different reasons. Um, so I would do, do Yeah, so there are few groups that I would say probably don't have any major pest species, and that would probably be the dragonflies and maybe the mantids they're just predators. The lacewings as well. They typically don't have major pest groups, but the large insects groups tend to. So your hemipterans are pests, your grasshoppers are pests, true bugs, but there are many predatory groups within the true bugs as well. Even though many of them can be pests.
Well, I have a
And so
question.
yeah.
So the fireflies, right?
Hmm.
They are both pests and predators, or they're never considered pests.
Fireflies?
Yeah, the lightning bugs.
I wouldn't consider them a pest.
Okay.
I
Never
would,
considered pests.
yeah. And so many insects are just in the environment, with their you could call them commensal. They have neither a positive or negative effect. Lightning bugs, I don't know if I've ever heard them being pests. I do believe that they tend to pollinate. Um, I don't know if I've heard many stories about them being a particular pest anywhere. I haven't seen them much either, you know. So maybe that's a signal of the insect decline, you know, that growing up around here, we used to see lightning bugs going up, or you know, the little light
Yeah,
going up every summer, but
yeah,
yeah, they just kind of been forgotten from memory, right?
yeah.
We've seen less and less. Um, Yeah, I did wanted to leave off with a few resources and things like that. And so hopefully I showed the importance of identifying insects. Insects are extremely diverse. They can look like a lot of different things and they could do a lot of different things in the environment. And so I gave some basic guidelines. If you want to get help identifying something, you want a clear picture or of the specimen or intact specimen. So if you need when you're asking for help, they can get as much information as they can identifying. You've seen how hard it can be seeing all of the characteristics from one picture. Imagine a blurry phone picture or a smashed specimen, you know. So try to get a clear picture of intact specimen. And there are plenty of useful ID resources around the internet. Bug Guide, Discover Life, and iNaturalist are some of my favorite. Um, if you're a big Reddit user, they have like, what is this bug? They have an entomology subreddit. A lot of hobbyists, you know, are really excited about identifying different things. And so you could get help in public forums like that. Cooperative extension is also a major help. Um, you have UDC causes. You also have like UMD extension where they have a Ask extension resource that you can email extension agent directly. You could, and so this is a public outreach service by many universities across the nation. They provide a lot of technical knowledge. And entomology is a big part of a lot of these cooperative extension programs. Um, some other guys I recommended are included here: the DC Department of Energy and Environment, University of Maryland Extension have a yard and garden website that has resources relating to pests and just, you know, guidelines for gardening, pest management, different things like that. These are some really good insect guides. So if you prefer books, Field Guide to Insects, these are some really good books that have, you know, keys and different things like that. And then I just left off with different resources that you can use. So you're very welcome to download this slide set and, you know, visit any of the resources in there. But other than that, those are some of the major horticulturally important insect groups. So next week we'll talk about integrated pest management. So talk a little bit more about, you know, identifying a pest, determining if it's even a threat. If it is a threat, what are some of the control management options you can use? Um, I'll talk a little bit more about some of my research that my research that I was doing related to like conservation biocontrol. Um, and then we'll talk more specifically about major pests in the area from um, you know, pests can be insect, they can be plants. So as weedy pests, you also have mammalian pests or your vertebrate pests in DC, like your rodents and things like that. So pest managers, is of course, more than just the insects. So we'll talk a little bit more about those and then just, you know, things like spotted lanternfly and other important groups that we're seeing around here. With that, that's all I have for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jermaine. I'll share my slides and share a few reminders with everybody. And then if we have some final questions or comments before we wrap up the night, we'll have time for that.